Well, the Raptors officially have a new coach, and ever since that, rumors have been flying about the actual direction that this team is going to take, especially with a couple of their key players hitting free agency. That's what we're going to talk about today. What's up, everybody? It's JJ Buckets. I've told you what we're going to do, so just before we fully get into things, just make sure you are leaving a like on the video. It really helps the algorithm out a ton. Subscribe to the channel if you're new here, plus if you plan on doing any responsible sports betting in the near future, just make sure to check out my link in the description below. So obviously, before I get into this, just keep in mind it's the off season. The rumors are always flying, they're always circling, so take everything to some extent with a pinch of salt. That being said, a Mark Stein article that came out pretty much around the time that Darko was hired as the new head coach for the Toronto Raptors cited the fact that it seems like both Fred VanVleet and Trent Jr. are more likely than not probably going to relocate, which is interesting, obviously, for plenty of reasons. On top of which, there was another article, I believe it was yesterday, or it wasn't an article, excuse me. It was from Jake Weinbach, said that Fred VanVleet is pretty much a guarantee to leave the team, obviously further building onto that. So here we are, right? Like the backcourt of the Toronto Raptors, Fred VanVleet, Trent Jr., even though obviously Gary kind of progressively got moved onto the bench, nonetheless, they kind of look like they're out the door. At least early indicators both believe to have Fred and Trent Jr. out the door, which is interesting for a plethora of reasons, right? Like, let's be honest about something. Obviously, the shooting on this team is not good. It was not good all season long, and for as bad as it is, these are two of your better shooters, right? I mean, like, OG is OG and OG is great, but then after OG, it's like, you know, you got Fred, you got Trent Jr., how much more shooting do you really have outside of that, right? So it's officially looking like there's a good chance it's going to be out the door. So where does that leave Toronto, a team that already struggled in that department and is seemingly fighting an even more uphill battle than they did last season? Now, obviously, Toronto's situation for this offseason is fluid and interesting, and obviously we have gotten, again, at least early indicators, early reports that the Raptors would prefer to retool as opposed to rebuild, which is certainly an opinion that the front office may have. Not gonna get into whether or not I like or don't like that. That's gonna take up way too much time here, and what's otherwise I think gonna be a relatively brief video. But if that's the plan, right, like, you know, losing both Gary and Fred would leave them with some cap space to maneuver with, even after obviously signing Jakob, which is the one thing that obviously we haven't heard anything about in terms of indicators that that will not happen. And again, like I said, I believe it was in my last video, I am fairly confident that Jakob is going to be back on this team. So with Jakob back, that is going to leave you with some cap space. So maybe they go about this retool, you know, through free agency, right? Like, maybe they are willing to let both Fred and Gary leave elsewhere, and they have contingency plans to replace that. And again, with a new head coach, it'll be interesting to see what direction they take. Obviously, Darko is somebody that offensively, at least from everything you read, from everything you hear, he is the type of dude that values ball movement a lot offensively, and he wants that thing consistently flying. So maybe they look for somebody that's a little bit more akin to that style, which I don't necessarily know if Fred and Trent Jr. were. I mean, obviously with Fred, like, he's a good passer, don't get me wrong, and he can definitely be a good maestro on his best day, but he's really somebody that thrives, I would say, in the pick and roll specifically, which is not necessarily the constant movement that you're going to be looking for in the offense, which, again, don't get me wrong, it's not like it's not moving, it's not like it's not an offensive scheme, but it's just, it's not necessarily the thing that we're talking about here. And Trent Jr., I mean, he's a scorer, he's a bit of a ball stopper, right? So maybe they're just looking or maybe they have contingency plans to look for players that would better fit the system of the new head coach they brought in. Again, you have Scottie Barnes there. I think a big portion of what they do this offseason will be, how do we put Scottie Barnes in the best position to succeed? So maybe they're going to look at other personnel in free agency that can service that role, can service that need. And yeah, it'll be interesting. Again, I've talked about the fact that in previous videos that I do genuinely think at least one of those three is gone when talking about the Raptors' main free agents. Now at least some indications make you feel like not all three, at least two of the three are gone, which I also believed was a very real possibility. Now naturally we won't fully know how this breaks down until obviously free agency actually kicks in and we have the results. But those are at least your early indicators from people in the NBA circles that claim to know anything about the NBA. So this is me telling you what we're hearing, and that has pretty much been it. What do you folks think? Here's something that I want to ask you, that I want to hear in the comment section. If both Gary Trent Jr. and Fred VanVleet are out the door, who do you expect the Raptors to pursue to replace them? Comment that below and let me know your thoughts. Other than that, folks, usual drill, just repeating it one more time. Like the video if you're still watching. I'd like to think you enjoyed it enough to just hit that like button. It takes like a second. It makes a huge difference for me. Subscribe to the channel if you're new here. And yeah, it's been JJ Buckets. It's been a pleasure, and I will see everybody next time.